My ex-boyfriend, completely insane, stole all my money and then disappeared. So, I tracked him down and did exactly the same thing to him. He went crazy after that and ended up in jail. When I met my boyfriend and opened my heart to him about my past relationship, I told him that the man I had been with was abusive. He responded by saying he would take care of me. Less than 2 weeks later, he was already sending me flowers at work. We started dating quickly, but unlike most sociopaths, he didn't flip the switch when we began dating. Instead, he was the perfect boyfriend for a whole year. I thought I was going to marry him, but one day, I woke up, and he was gone, along with all of his things. I called him, but he didn't answer. I started going through drawers, hoping to find something, but realized that some valuable items, like my watch, earrings, and even the cash I had in my wallet, were gone. The worst part was when I checked my bank account and saw that he had cleaned it out. Every penny of the $10,000 I had in savings was gone. Since I was quite naive at the time and living beyond my means, I couldn't pay the rent for the next 3 months. I was evicted and became homeless. The following weeks were a blur. I couldn't eat or sleep, and my phone didn't stop ringing with calls from debt collectors. It was humiliating. I had gone from having everything, love, a stable life, and finances in order, to absolutely nothing. My family couldn't believe what had happened, and I didn't even want to explain. It was too shameful. Living in my car wasn't sustainable. I parked in different places every night to avoid drawing attention, but it was only a matter of time before someone noticed. I still had some belongings piled up in the back seat, but it seemed like every day I was losing more, whether it was my dignity, my hope, or another bill I couldn't pay. Eventually, I realized I couldn't handle it alone and called Kaya. Kaya had been my best friend for years, since college. We had drifted apart after we started working, but the bond was still strong. Whenever we met for lunch, when she found out what had happened, she didn't hesitate. She immediately offered me a place to stay. At first, I resisted. I didn't want to be a burden, but Kaya wouldn't take no for an answer. "You're moving into my house. End of discussion," she said, crossing her arms and giving me a look that made it clear she meant it. I didn't have much of a choice, so I gathered what little I had left and moved into her guest room. It wasn't much, but it was infinitely better than sleeping in my car. That first night, I cried with relief until I fell asleep. I was incredibly grateful that someone still cared about me after everything I'd been through. I stayed at Kaya's house for a while, started applying for jobs, and worked on getting my finances in order. But no matter how hard I tried, one thought wouldn't leave my mind. Who was out there living the life with my money, probably laughing at how easily they had fooled me? The anger I felt was overwhelming. I wasn't the type to let things go easily, and the more I thought about it, the more determined I became to track him down. I knew it was crazy, and I even debated whether I should just let it go, move on, and rebuild my life, but I couldn't. That's when I decided to hire a private investigator. It was a risk. I didn't have much extra money, but I scraped together what I could and hired the PI to track him down. The decision ended up coinciding with me receiving my paycheck from a job I'd gotten at a coffee shop. I needed to know where he was, what he was doing, and if there was any chance of recovering my money. After a few weeks at Kaya's house, I started feeling guilty. Even though she kept saying I didn't need to worry about rent, it bothered me. She was my best friend, and I didn't want to take advantage of her kindness. One morning, over coffee, I told her that I would start paying rent. She refused, but I insisted, saying it would help me feel like I had more control over my life. Reluctantly, she agreed. The way I found was by opening another credit card. I had sworn I would never use credit again after what had happened, but it seemed like my only option. Between paying the rent and financing the detective to track him down, the costs were piling up. It wasn't like I could ask my parents for help. They already thought I had been reckless for getting myself into this mess in the first place. I stared at the screen of my phone for a solid 20 minutes before finally pressing send on the credit card application. I knew it would be worth it. I would recover my money as soon as I found him. When I got back everything he had stolen from me, I could pay Kaya, pay the detective, and pay off all these credit cards. It was temporary, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. Temporary or not, seeing the debts pile up made me nauseous. The PI wasn't cheap, and I reserved a large part of that new credit limit just to pay him. Every week, I received a new update, another lead on where he was hiding. Kaya noticed that I had been more tense lately. One night, while we were watching TV, she casually asked if I was okay because I seemed stressed. I didn't want to worry her with the details, so I said I was fine, just trying to balance things out. She mentioned that if it was about the PI, I shouldn't go through with it, that I didn't need to ruin myself over it. She was right. I had told her about the PI, but not that I had already gone ahead with it. I felt bad for not being completely honest, but I knew I had to do it. Once everything was over, I would get my money back and pay every cent I owed. I just needed a little more time. Kaya raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. The detective worked quickly. In 2 weeks, he found him in another city. He was living under a different name, using fake documents. Of course, still living off the money he had stolen from me. Seeing the photos of him reignited a flame inside me. I wasn't going to let him get away, but I knew I needed help. That's when I thought of Sara. Sara was someone I hadn't spoken to in a long time. We had been close before, but over time, we drifted apart. I wasn't sure what to expect from Sara. It had been years since we last talked, and the last time I saw her, she was getting into trouble that bordered on dangerous. However, that's exactly why I thought of her. Sara had always known how to navigate chaos as if it were second nature, and I needed someone like that by my side now. Someone who not only understood the dirty games people played, but also knew how to win them. I grabbed my phone, hesitantly, and typed her a message, explaining briefly what had happened and that I needed her help. It didn't take more than a few minutes for her reply to come. "I'll meet you at the bar on the corner in an hour. We've got a lot to talk about." My heart raced. What was I about to do? Part of me still hesitated, but another part, bigger and hungrier for justice, pushed me forward. I put on my coat, took a deep breath, and left the house. Kaya was at work, so I wouldn't have to explain anything. Maybe it was better that way because she would definitely try to dissuade me. The bar was pretty empty when I walked in. In the corner, a woman with a penetrating gaze and an enigmatic smile waved at me. It was Sara, as full of energy as I remembered. When I approached, she raised an eyebrow. Her look, already full of ulterior motives, said, "So, who stole from you and you want payback?" "Is that it?" she said, skipping the formalities. I nodded and sat down. "I want him to pay for everything. He ruined my life." Sara leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with that dangerous mix of empathy and excitement. "You came to the right person, darling. Let's make this happen. But before anything, you need to be prepared. This won't be easy, and more importantly, it won't be legal." My throat went dry. Legality was the last thing I was thinking about after everything he had done. Any hesitation I had before was evaporating. "I'm ready," I said, trying to sound confident. "Good. The first thing we need to do is flip the script. He used fake documents, right? And he's flying under the radar." "Yes." The detective showed me pictures of him. "He's in another city with a different name." "Great. So the first step is to make him feel the same way you felt when you realized you lost everything. Let's make him doubt everything around him, even his own safety." "How do we do that?" I asked, feeling a mix of curiosity and fear. Sara grinned mischievously and began outlining her plan. The first step was simple but brutal. Mess with his mind. The detective had already gotten information about where he was living, but Sara had contacts. She knew hackers, people who could break into bank accounts, security systems, and even alter credit histories. The idea was to make him believe he was being watched, that his money was disappearing, that his fake identity was compromised. Slowly, we would destroy the life he had built with the money he stole from me. "We'll start small," Sara explained. "He'll notice little changes, a purchase he doesn't remember making, a charge that suddenly appears. And when he starts realizing something's wrong, we'll intensify it." In the following weeks, we followed Sara's plan. It was like watching a plot unfold, only this time, I was in control. He started receiving calls from banks questioning suspicious transfers. Mysterious purchases began appearing on his statement, and he became paranoid. I knew this because, with the help of the detective and Sara's contacts, I was monitoring his every move. Watching his life fall apart was a bitter pleasure, but I knew it still wasn't enough. That's when Sara suggested something bolder. "What if you go to him?" My stomach churned. Oh man. No direct contact at first. Just enough for him to know you're around, that you didn't disappear like he thought you would. It'll be a mental blow. He needs to feel like you're a shadow on his heels. I was terrified by the idea, but I knew Sara was right. It was the next logical step. So, I prepared. With the help of the detective, I temporarily moved to the city where he was living. I rented a small apartment where I could observe him and started following him from a distance, always staying in the shadows. I spent days just watching, waiting for the right moment to make my move. One night, I went to the bar he usually frequented and sat in the darkest corner. He was with friends, laughing, as if nothing had happened. The anger inside me surged again. When he went to the bathroom, I followed him without him noticing, and there, in the narrow hallway, while he washed his hands, I appeared. When he saw me in the reflection of the mirror, his shocked expression was almost comical. I didn't say anything, just stood there, staring at him, letting the fear settle in. He tried to say something, but his voice failed him. I left before he could react, knowing that at that moment, I had planted the seed of terror. He started acting erratically after that. He canceled plans, changed his routine, and even tried to move apartments, but nothing worked. Whenever he thought he was safe, there I was, appearing from a distance, just enough for him to know I was nearby. With each appearance, he became more paranoid, and that only fueled me further. The final phase of Sara's plan involved something even darker, destroying the last bit of stability he had in his life. That's when we took measures that forced him to make a fatal mistake. His paranoia led him to try transferring large sums of money through fraudulent schemes, and it didn't take long for the authorities to catch him. When the police arrested him, everything he had built crumbled like a house of cards. I was there, across the street, when he was handcuffed. He saw me, and his eyes, filled with desperation, searched for some explanation. But all he found was my satisfied smile. At that moment, I knew I had won. After Ken's arrest, I thought the battle was finally over. He was in prison, his life ruined, and I had gotten some semblance of justice. However, it wasn't long before the situation took a new turn. A month after his arrest, I received a formal letter from a law firm. He was suing me for invasion of privacy, harassment, and even emotional distress. What was even more absurd, he wanted to make me look like the villain in this story. As I read that letter, blood rushed to my head. It felt like the system itself was laughing in my face. He had destroyed my life, stolen everything I had, and now he wanted me to pay for his own downfall. My anger grew stronger each day. I spoke to Sara about it, and she, as always, was ready for the fight. If he thinks he's going to bring you down again, he's got another thing coming. We're going to fight this, and we're going to win. I hired a good lawyer with the little money I had saved, and we started preparing our defense. The strategy was simple. Reverse the narrative and show that he wasn't the victim, but the predator. The first hearing was tense. He showed up in court wearing what I imagined was his disguise of a remorseful man. He had a defeated look, as if he was trying to convince everyone he was an unjustly treated man. His lawyer presented his case fervently, claiming that my actions had been a campaign of terror against him, that I had stalked him and ruined his life. They even tried to downplay the theft he had committed, arguing that there wasn't enough evidence that he had actually taken all of my money. On the other hand, I was determined not to be manipulated anymore. I took a deep breath when my lawyer began presenting the evidence. All the bank transfers, the fake documents, the detective's reports. Of course, the devastating impact he had caused in my life. In court, I had the chance to tell my story. I talked about what he had done, the time I was homeless, the suffering he caused me. My lawyer argued that all my actions were an attempt to reclaim what was rightfully mine, and that the real victim in this story was me. The evidence was all there, irrefutable. After months of back and forth in court, the decision finally came. I won the case. The judge not only dismissed his claims, but also ruled that he pay a significant fine for all the trouble he had caused, an amount that, added to what he already owed me, began to change my life. Additionally, the judge issued a protective order against him, prohibiting any direct or indirect contact with me. Now, he was required to keep his distance, and any attempt to violate this order would result in even more severe consequences. The feeling of relief was indescribable. For the first time, I was truly free from him. With the money I received from the settlement, I began to plan what I would do next. During the process, I had shared part of my story online, in forums and social media, to warn other women about the kind of person he was and the dangers he represented. The response was overwhelming. My story resonated with many people, and soon, I received supportive messages from women who had been through similar situations and from people who wanted to see justice served. That's when I had an idea, to turn my experience into something positive and productive. With the money I received, I invested in myself, taking courses and training, and began creating online content, sharing my journey of overcoming. I told it in detail, how I was deceived, how I rose again, and how I fought to reclaim my life. My social media following grew rapidly, and before I knew it, I was being invited to speak at events and conferences on financial recovery, abusive relationships, and resilience. Over time, I turned these talks into a solid career. I started a consulting business, helping women rebuild their lives from complicated situations, whether financially or emotionally. Today, I earn far more than the $10,000 he stole from me. In fact, the money he took now seems small compared to what I've built for myself. Not only did I recover, but I also became an inspiration to others. My name began circulating in magazines, blogs, and even television programs, always telling the story of how I turned the tables. More than ever, I felt that I had something valuable to offer the world. Not just my story of revenge, but a message of hope. The most ironic thing of all is that what he tried to take from me ended up being the driving force for me to find a much greater purpose in life. He tried to destroy me, but I rose from the ashes, stronger than I could have ever imagined. While he continues to face legal and financial troubles, I am here, living a life he never could have foreseen. And today, in my talks, I always end with the same phrase. Sometimes, the worst thing that happens to you is what leads you to your greatest triumph. This phrase has become my motto, a constant reminder that, no matter how life tries to knock us down, it's possible to rise again and achieve much more than what was taken from us.